like the environmental movement, and I'd be curious if, informally to hear what you see in your businesses. It completely is the sort of two pillars. It's people 18 to 24, and it's people who used to be hippies. And there's this big gap in the middle. And if you ask any of the fundraising organizations from the big environmental agencies, they'll tell you exactly the same thing. Their money comes from those two pillars. So we over-index both on the young side and on the older side. There are viewers in the middle, there's readers in the middle, but in terms of indexing against 100, that's what we see. Almost exclusively on the online side, I don't have on-air data for this yet. It's completely urban, so good news for you since you're all from Queens or the area. But it heavily skews urban. Indexing it, not just obviously because more people live in urban areas, but if you index it against any of the norms, it heavily skews urban. Lots of conjecture why that may be. A lot of people say, well, people who don't live in an urban area, they have a slightly different mentality towards this. In a lot of ways, they don't see the issue the same way because they've made that change. They've never gotten into the problem in the first place. They see the world a little differently. Lots of theories around that. Other aspects of the folks who come to our site and on air, above average education. I'm not sure what that means yet. I have some theories when I get to a later slide a little bit. But above average education tend to be above average income, but I think that just lines up with above average education, to be honest. Our site, TreeHugger, skews to people interested in the design crafts. So architects, clothing designers, product designers. That's probably just in the nature of what we cover. Although we cover everything, we tend to see that it skews to people who are interested in the design components of the world. We've seen similar on Planet Green. So just a little bit of data against this also. Most of the US, that's just because it's an English site. As I said, educated, above average income, 50-50. But here's the really big one. And we've studied this a few times. We studied it for TreeHugger, we studied it for Planet Green, the TV network. I think last time it was 65, maybe it was 68% of people said they would spend some amount more to buy a green product. We didn't ask how much more, but they were at least willing to consider that initially if a green product was more expensive, they would make that change. So that's pretty good news. That people are thinking that way, that they see the importance of it. What we try and do at TreeHugger is to obviously encourage those companies, so as they reach volume, it'll come down. So just a couple of guidelines also. I wanted to take some questions after. I don't know if there's anyone in the room thinking this way. Clearly I don't. This is not just a business opportunity. This is the problem of our time. Whether you talk about climate change or you talk about sustainability, this is a big problem. The government has made climate change one of the top. They've tied it to the economy. So if you just think about it as a business opportunity, it's not going to work. I mean, maybe you'll get lucky. We've actually seen a couple of our competitors recently fall away. Some of them were from very big media organizations, some of them were small. They sort of jumped on the green bandwagon, so let's put out the green site, we'll sell advertising against it. They weren't really committed. Whatever, maybe the individual was committed, the staff they brought on wasn't committed. This is not just a business opportunity. I don't know how else to say that. I've seen some advertisers come to us who really didn't get it, and it just didn't work out. I'm not going to tell you. Someone said this earlier, you got to walk the walk. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be authentic. You don't have to do everything right, but don't pretend you're perfect because you do a couple of things in your business. If your business buys green power, great. You should talk about that. If you have CFL light bulbs, that's great. If you recycle all your products, that's great. Talk about what you do. Talk about how you're going to fix the things that you don't do. But for goodness sake, don't essentially greenwash by saying because we do these three things, no matter how big or small they are, we're perfect. Because you're not, and no one is, and that's not what it's about. It's about just this long process that we're going to get there as the economy changes. It'll be easier and easier to do. Probably one of the biggest things we believe in is measuring what you do. There's an expression in business, you've all heard it, what gets measured gets changed or fixed. You gotta start, if you just do a couple steps, whether that's, again, recycle or change your light bulbs, it sort of feels good, you don't know what the impact is. You gotta start measuring. There's a number of good tools out there, calculators, there's consultants. You gotta understand what your footprint is, and we're talking about footprint in greenhouse gases now. You really need to understand what it is, what your footprint is. Because you'll find that certain changes make a big difference, certain changes don't. If you go on a diet, you're going to step on the scale every morning, you're going to count your calories. If you don't measure what you're doing, or if you're in the business of helping people measure what they do, it's hard to talk about it in any concrete fashion. So you got to start somewhere. The measurements aren't perfect today. And the sort of last thing, before I take a couple questions I want to leave you with, is what we've decided at TreeHugger, and we've been around for a while, and all these tips are out there about over-packaging and CFL. The small changes aren't going to get us where we need to get to. So, I don't know where all the politicians stand on this yet. The small changes are important for lots of reasons, many of them on the sustainability side as opposed to the greenhouse gas side. But really, it's going to be big changes that make the difference. Really, really big changes. The biggest single change that almost any one of us can do as an individual, or as a or as a business, is to buy green power, for instance. I don't know how many people in the room buy green power. Okay. The rest of you can cut your emissions depending what state you live in, what town, whatever. It's minimum 20%, sometimes up to 50%. That is the biggest single thing you can do right now. There is not enough green power to go around if everyone buys green power, but it'll generate more supply. The little things are great, but it's the big things that are going to make a difference. It's more important to convince 3 people to go from 10 mile per gallon cars to 25 miles per gallon cars than to get 1 person to go from the economy car to a Prius. We really need to make the big changes now to start to make a difference. And if we don't do it soon, and that's our position at TreeHugger, it's really going to be a problem. So we're going to talk more and more at TreeHugger about what are those big things you can do to really make a difference and give people tools to make that decision in their life.